brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries. In the weeks ahead, you will see these and other programs by various denominations.
The beauty of Christmas is manifested in a variety of ways, certainly in the lovely poinsettia plants, also in the lights that are all around the communities within our state. And today on Austin Faith Dialogue, we're going to talk about some of those traditions of the holiday season. Join us today.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
The centerpiece of all the celebrations held by communities and families throughout the year probably is the Christmas time, the time when people gather around to remember the beauty and the goodness of life. Today on Austin Faith Dialogue, Elizabeth Silverthorne is with us to talk about the traditions of Christmas as she has shared them in her book. I'm Carl Gronberg, and I'm your host for the program. And Elizabeth Silverthorne, welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
You are a writer, and you've written many books, but I'd like, first of all, for those who watch Austin Faith Dialogue, and by the way, Elizabeth, I want to tell you this, that we've been doing this program for almost 6 years now, and this is the first time I've had just one guest with me. So this is a new experience for me, so I'm going to need your help, all right? So you stay with me on this program.
I'll try.
Thank you. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that has to do with Christmas and the holiday traditions. Where were you raised, and what is your background?
I grew up in South Texas, but I grew up in a very English family. I grew up in my grandmother's home. My mother was born in London. And, of course, we had the English traditions. I remember the plum puddings with the trinkets in there that were symbolic. If you got the ring, you would, of course, have romance in your life.
Mm-hmm.
If you got the ship, you would travel. And, of course, you didn't want to get the thimble or the button because you would be an old maid or a bachelor. And then the mince pies, of course, that were made early in the season.
I'm of the opinion that people who have those types of traditions in their lives grow up to have a balance about life. They grow up with a sense of wonderment and mystery and joy about life. And that certainly is obvious with you, because as you grew up, you became interested not only in your English background that your mother gave to you, but the traditions of many people. You went off to school then.
Yes, I went to Rice and to various other schools. I'm a perennial student. I'm always taking classes. And finally graduated from North Texas in Denton and became a teacher there.
You know, your alma mater now is called University of North Texas, right?
Right.
Yeah, they changed the name a little bit from North Texas State University.
And I had a degree from Texas Women's University, which also changed its name several times.
But you also studied at the University of Texas.
Yes, yes, under W.A. Owens, who really encouraged me. I'm the type of person who likes to research more than I like to write, and he finally told me it's time to quit researching and start writing.
I'm fascinated by people who write. What about this writing gift? You say that it's almost an obsession with you, though. You need to research, you need to write, you need to share. Where does that interest come from?
Probably from my mother, who also wrote for her classes. She was a teacher, and she wrote skits and plays and had a children's book published and always read to us. I think the other side of writing is reading, and she was a great reader and made us love books.
That's one of the reasons that I'm glad you're on Austin Faith Dialogue, because I think during the holiday season, one of the things that you are watching the program might make as a goal is to sit down and read to the family. I know many out of the background that I come from who would sit down and read the nativity story, for instance. That was a part of their Christmas tradition, to be able to share that. And I think those kinds of experience, like you were saying, stay with a person. When did you write your first book?
I wrote a children's book back in 1975. It was The Ghost of Padre Island. We had taken many camping trips to Padre Island, and we had taken our black basset hound, and I found out something from writing that book that many writers had told me, that sometimes a character will run away with the book, and the Black Basset Hound tried to run away with that book, washing it down.
You know, I'd like to pursue that with you, but I think we probably better stick with the Christmas traditions and some of those kinds of things that you researched. Following the writing of that first book in 1975, I know from looking at your credits, you've written many books. What are some of the other books that you've read?
They have been largely about Texas subjects, because I love Texas history and Texas traditions. I wrote a biography of Ashbel Smith, who was the father of the University of Texas. Not many people know that, but if they'll walk down Old Main, the corridor there, they'll find the cornerstone with his name on it.
Interesting.
And the First Ladies of Texas, I collaborated with another woman in writing that. And then Plantation Life in Texas, which was suggested by James Michener as a book that ought to be done by Texas A&M Press.
And it was done by them?
Yes.
You said that you were interested in writing. Your mother wrote. She was a teacher. Is there a type of spiritual reality for you when you write? Is there something that happens within yourself that you experience that expresses your soul, if you will?
Well, sometimes it's just terrible drudgery, and sometimes it's very uplifting. You don't ever feel you get it quite right, but sometimes you get it almost right, and that is uplifting, yes.
Kind of a manifestation of life, huh?
Yes, yes. I think
Because
so.
life can be drudgery one moment, and life can be so very inspirational and joyful in the next. As you were thinking about writing the book that we want to talk about today, Christmas Traditions, what were some of the things that led you to want to share that book with the public?
I live in Salado now, which is in the center of Czech community, and have many Czech friends, and they were telling me their traditions. I have German friends, I have Italian friends, and I realized that there's such a diversity in Texas, and not many people know about the great diversity. In fact, we have 30 different ethnic groups here.
That is interesting.
And when I realized that, I thought, I know so little about it, and almost always my writing is a search for myself to learn, and then to share what I learned.
Well, maybe that's the spiritual component, that search for self.
I think you're right.
That as you interact with other people, that as you experience how they see life and perceive life, that possibly, Elizabeth, that's how we find out more about ourselves and the ultimate relationship with that which is beyond us.
Yes, many writers say you do write to find out about yourself. I think that's very true.
I'm kind of thinking, Elizabeth, that a lot of people preach to find out about themselves too, you know. So I think
Sure
that, or teach, or whatever it is, and maybe that's what we call an expression of vocation. Did you travel a lot to research this book? Did you go around the state?
Yes, I went to many interesting places, such as Panna Maria, to research the Polish tradition there. And people were so generous and so nice to me, and they often fixed me their traditional Christmas dishes. Of course, I went to Fredericksburg for the German tradition, to San Antonio for the Spanish tradition, and to Castroville for the French, and also for the Cajun over in the Beaumont area. So this is what I thoroughly enjoy, is the traveling and the research and the meeting people.
Later in the program, we're going to show some pictures from some of those travels and experiences that you also mentioned that a lot of these events that we're going to talk about are featured in Texas Highways magazine. Is that correct?
Yes, people can look in Texas Highways magazine in the November issue to find out where the Christmas celebrations will be, such as the one at Fort Concho, where they decorate the barracks in traditional ways, and the Dickens on the Strand celebration in Galveston, and the Anson Cowboy Christmas Ball. That's an annual affair.
Yeah, we're kind of teasing the viewers of Austin Faith Dialogue, because we want them to see these pictures and talk with us a little bit about that in the second part of the program. Elizabeth, where do you think that you had the most exciting experience? Can you delineate one place that was something so new and different that you hadn't experienced before as you researched this book?
I'd hate to do that because they were all enjoyable in different ways. Of course, Christmas on the Strand was so interesting to me because it was Dickens brought to life, and if he wasn't Father Christmas, well, he should have been. And it was the old English traditions that were brought to life there. But Fort Concho was interesting because I learned so
Going
many
back to
different
Dickens
things.
on the Strand, though, I'm wondering about that. I've never been to that, and that's in Galveston, correct?
Yes, right.
And that harkened back to your roots, English roots, that type of thing?
I think
What
that's-
exactly did you experience there? That was something that touched you, evidently.
Yes, I could imagine my ancestors in those, they even have the dimly lighted streets that they had then with just the kind of lighting they would have had. And the costumes are all authentic of what they would have worn in Victorian times. And of course, my grandmother was Victorian, my mother was Edwardian, and I could imagine their kinds of Christmases that would have been like that.
Do people come from all over to something like that when you were there in Galveston? Were there people, did you meet people from all over the world or all of the United States? Do they come, or are they basically Texans who come there?
Oh, from all over the world.
And I think that would be a part of the great experience of going and visiting some of these places, because you would have that opportunity to meet a lot of people.
Yes, and I remember at Fort Concho there were people from, overseas and all of the United States, and it's a great attraction, I think.
When I think about Christmas, for me, Advent, Elizabeth, and Christmas in these days, I think about a story, a very ancient story of freedom, of light, of liberation, of hope, of joy. But there's also a lot of legend and myth that is kind of wrapped up in all of this. And that's okay, that's a part of it. You mentioned before we came on the set about St. Nicholas and that being an important part of some of the cultures. Maybe you could tell our viewers who don't know about St. Nicholas a little bit about that story.
Well, of course, he was a real man, but like King Arthur, he got to be larger than life through legends. He was noted for his generosity. He was always giving, and particularly to children, so he became the patron saint of many children in Europe. And then his feast day, of course, is December the 6th, and so that became a day to give gifts. And gradually, he evolved into our Santa Claus. The Dutch brought him to New Amsterdam, and because he was Saint Niklaus, and the American children couldn't quite say that, so they said Santa or Santa Claus. And then Washington Irving gave him his Dutch breeches and his clay pipe, and Clement Moore, in 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, gave him the reindeer to pull him along, and his red nose and his jolly personality. And Thomas Nast, who was illustrator during the Civil War, added to this picture of him, and so he evolved. And in many traditions, I find that they still give gifts on December 6th, and they still give gifts on December 25th.
Why not? It sounds like a good idea to me.
Right.
Well, you know, we try to observe the 12 days of Christmas in our family life, starting in our Swedish tradition, starting on Christmas Eve and then going through the day of the Kings, Epiphany Day.
Right.
And that's really fun because we can kind of dole out the gifts as we go along. The kids really like it. And they even remember Dad every once in a while with some gifts too. So I think that whole idea of gift giving raises a spiritual dimension that we can really enjoy. I'm thinking also about some of the other traditions that you ran into and shared and that you have written about in your book. And we're going to talk more about those on Austin Faith Dialogue, but we want to take a moment to talk about Austin Metropolitan Ministries and the opportunities we have for service in this community. Please stay with us on this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue as we continue more to talk to Elizabeth Silverthorne about her book of traditions in the holiday and the Christmas season.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue. We're talking today about Christmas in Texas and the traditions of Christmas in Texas. And this book is written by Elizabeth Silverthorne, who's a resident of Salado and visiting with us on the Austin Faith Dialogue program today. And we were talking about Santa Claus, Elizabeth, St. Nicholas.
Yes.
And in this one that I'm showing to you now, that's the dark side, did you say? You were telling me?
Well, nobody knows quite how the anti-Santa Clauses came to be, but often there was a companion that came with St. Nicholas who asked the children about their behavior. And we have a remnant of that in he's going to find out who's naughty and nice.
That's right,
and,
Santa Claus is coming.
But around Fredericksburg, some of the old settlers remember a very threatening companion that was with Santa Claus. And they had to say their little verse, and they had to be on their best behavior.
Do you find it interesting, and this is kind of off on the side of what we're talking about, that there are those people of faith, I think well-intentioned people, Elizabeth, who want to play down Santa Claus? They find Santa Claus to be a threat to the entire Christmas message. Is that a little strange to you?
Not at all. I think that even Martin Luther wanted the Christ child to be the gift giver rather than St. Nicholas because he felt threatened by St. Nicholas. And so Santa Claus even more perhaps than St. Nicholas.
Maybe it could be both. Maybe we could look at the Christ child as being the gift of God, but also St. Nicholas sharing the gifts with us, or Santa Claus.
Right.
We want to take our viewers around the state of Texas, and we want to look at some of the events, and we're going to put some pictures on the screen for you, and maybe you could tell us where we are and what this is, and share some of those pictures with us, Elizabeth.
Yes, this is Las Posadas in San Antonio. And of course, there is a large public Las Posadas each year. The exact date can be found out by looking in Texas Highways magazine. And here are the mariachis and the people parading. Of course, many, many lights. The carols are sung in both Spanish and in English. And there's a big parade all down the Riverwalk, which is brightly lighted. These are scenes from Las Posadas, Joseph and Mary, of course, and the manger scene.
The Joseph and Mary looking for a place to stay and finding the place to give birth to the Christ child, Las Posadas. And that comes out of the what ethnic group?
Out of the Spanish tradition, and of course there are many private posadas all around the state where families go from one house to another, knocking on doors, and they sing the traditional, let us in, no, there's no room. Finally, they're let in, and then there are prayers and singing and around the manger scene, and then there's a party, of course, with a piñata.
And you know, yes, that's fun also. The communities of faith often do this type of thing, and I know in our community of faith, we do the Las Posadas, and our Spanish ministry leads that, and it's always fun for the Anglo community, for all the people who are a part of the congregational family, to share in that Las Posadas. Is there room? Yes, there's room. Come in, and then let's have the party.
Yes.
Let's go now to the lights. Let's look at the lights. Now, where would that be?
This is Johnson City, is this?
I believe that's right.
The courthouse. And of course, many of the courthouses around the state are lit up like this. Even the oil wells in Kilgore are lit up. And there are lights on all the boats in Corpus Christi. And
do you recognize that guy with the guitar?
it looks like Elvis. I think it is. Anything you can hang lights on can be lit up. And of course, some of them are very beautiful. Some of them are slightly garish. And this, of course, is San Antonio with the Riverwalk lit up.
That's beautiful, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
and they have there the luminarios, the little candles in the sandbags, or sometimes they're electric lights now.
Right.
And of course, there's also the tradition of the pinon logs that were that are used in New Mexico so much. And
talk about the luminaries. You know, I'm a newcomer to Texas within the last 20+ years, so that was new to me, luminaries.
Well, one tradition is that they lit the way of Joseph and Mary, and in New Mexico, in many places, they refer to the candles in the sandbags as farolitos, little lights, and then the luminarios are the cross pinon logs that are the bonfires.
I think it's beautiful to drive through many of the neighborhoods in Austin and see how they have the luminaries out, and people having them illuminated for the walkway to their churches and to their homes.
Yes.
And that whole idea, that tradition again, that the holiday season is to bring us light. It kind of stretches us, doesn't it? Makes us realize that there is much more than that which we oftentimes see and think is life. The holiday season brings that to us.
We do that in our little village. For our Christmas stroll, we outline all the walks. And
In Salado?
Yes, in Salado.
And invite people to come and,
Yes,
and
yes.
stroll with you.
We have a Christmas stroll the first weekend in December every year.
When we started the program, we opened with a poinsettia plant, and I think that'll be our next one that we'll look at. Isn't that a beautiful poinsettia tree? Talk to us about the poinsettia.
It came to us from Mexico. Joel Poinsett was the first minister of the United States to Mexico, and he was there to try to get Texas for the United States. He didn't succeed in getting Texas for the United States, but he brought back this plant that he was a botanist, and it intrigued him. They call it the flame leaf, or the Christmas Eve, the flower of Christmas Eve there. He brought it back, gave it to a nurseryman, and from there it spread, and I don't think it would be Christmas without poinsettias now.
They are just so beautiful, and to see them in homes and see them around the altars and places of worship, the poinsettia plant, become a real tradition within the life.
Right.
You mentioned about Fort Concho. Now that's all new to me. I didn't even know where Fort Concho is located. Talk to us a little bit about that and its location.
Well, the forts, of course, were located on the western edge of civilization to protect the settlers, and San Angelo was one of the places, and Fort Concho has preserved these officers' barracks. One is decorated in the Mexican tradition, one in the German, one in the Italian, and then there's a Texas house, and they recreate the dances, the music that they would have had. There was a very great danger of desertion around Christmas time because the men were so lonesome in these far-out locations, so they would have elaborate parties and festivities connected with Christmas in order to keep them busy and keep them at the fort.
Keep their spirits up. You know, we talked
Absolutely.
about life, that sometimes there's drudgery, but during the holiday season, our spirits are to be lifted and illuminated, and certainly the Fort Concho experience describes that. Let's talk about the cowboys of Texas and look at some of those pictures.
Yes, this is the Anson Cowboys Christmas Ball, which is an annual tradition. It started
Where is that, Elizabeth?
in Anson, which is up in the northern part of Texas.
Okay,
And
Anson, Texas.
it started back in the 19th century when a New York reporter watched the ball, and then he wrote the famous Cowboys Christmas Ball poem about it. And now it's revived every year with traditional schottisches and put your little foot and that sort of dance. And people can go and sit in the balcony and watch.
Watch them dance. Well, and then I think we're going to conclude our pictures with a picture of the Dickens Strand, Christmas on the Strand, is that what it's called? And
Yes.
talk to me about that. You shared some of that with us before. That's beautiful.
Yes, it seems to grow every year, and they go to great pains to have it very authentic. The food is all authentic. They set up the pubs as they would be in England. You can get the traditional drinks that you would in England, and the costumes. They put on the Christmas Carol each year, and there are some of the participants. Queen Victoria rides down the street looking very snooty and waving
Regal
her
and
hand
royal, yes.
at the crowds.
I think that,
That's-
look at that bicycle.
Yes, that would be something that they would, and they have jugglers and mimes and people selling chestnuts and all the things that they would be doing in England. They're the chestnuts.
Our family went to New York City for the holidays a few years back, and it was fun to walk the streets of New York City and chestnuts roasting on an open fire and all that type of thing.
yes.
Well, from Anson, which is up in the northwest, right? And I've not been to Anson, so you have to help me, Elizabeth, that that's up in that part of the world. And then down to Galveston, and then Marshall. They have the lights of Marshall, and we saw the lights in some of the pictures. Over to San Angelo, all these various traditions of the ethnic communities, and they're all recorded here in your book, Christmas in Texas. One of the things that has always been a part of my background has been food. What were some of the foods that you encountered as you did research on your book?
Well, there are recipes in the book, and some of them I collected when I was traveling overseas, when I was a stewardess with Pan American, and just because I like collecting recipes. Then there's the 200-year-old plum pudding recipe from my great-great aunt that we always had at Christmas. And many friends gave me recipes, German and Czech and so forth are in there, collected from friends.
As you went around researching the book and visiting with the variety of ethnic groups in the state of Texas, and you said, what do we have, 20 ethnic? 30 ethnic groups? Yeah, that's marvelous. That makes a grouping of people from all around the world have come to Texas. What type of experiences did you have with food? Did they feed you some food, different foods that you were not used to, and maybe have some interesting stories about that?
Yes, I think that, of course, the sweets are emphasized, and the variety of cookies and many of the recipes for cookies are in there, and the breads, the Christmas traditional breads, the yeast breads and so forth, and the New Year's breads that are traditional, and the French chocolate rolls, and I'm afraid I gained a few pounds along the way.
You mentioned when we were talking before the program about visiting some sisters, and they not only gave you cookies, but they would also invite in the children in the community, is that correct?
Yes, these were German sisters who, the Timmerman sisters who lived together for 68 years. They celebrated Christmases. There were 7 of them never married. And they spent their Christmas season, and I expect most of the year, getting ready for Christmas so they could have this enormous tree hung with all the traditional German decorations, and then the elaborate scenes under the tree, and then invite school children. Busloads of school children would visit and
you know, that is another
share
tradition that you mentioned, the manger scenes, the different scenes that people have, and sometimes that they put them out in their yards, not only with the lights and the luminaries, but also have the manger scenes. We have to also, before we end Austin Faith Dialogue for today, Elizabeth, we've got to talk a little bit about those Scandinavian traditions, all right? You have to do this for me, all right? You said you went to Clifton, is that right? You talked to some of the people from up there, and some lutefisk, did you?
Yes. I think lutefisk is an acquired taste.
You be careful.
It's sent to Texas in these huge 3-foot-long dried pieces, and then hacked up with axes and so forth, and then it's rejuvenated. And this is a very tedious, careful process, and then it's served at this traditional gathering, and it's really quite good with the boiled potatoes and the butter and
Thank
all the
you
things
for
that go with
saying
it.
it's quite good. Yes, the Swedes put cream sauce on, the Norwegians put butter on, but all of those are part of the traditions of the life. Santa Lucia is another one of those Scandinavian traditions that brings light and hope and joy to the holiday season.
It's a lovely tradition, and also the fact that they are so good to their animals, and they think of the animals at Christmas and put out sheaves of wheat for the birds and that sort of thing.
Elizabeth, it's been a delight to have you in Austin Faith Dialogue. If people watching this program want to purchase the book Christmas in Texas, how might they do so?
They could order it through A&M Press at College Station, or some of the bookstores around town have it. And if they come to Salado, Fletcher's bookstore always has it.
Well, we are grateful that you would come from Salado to Austin, and that you would appear with us in Austin Faith Dialogue. And we want to wish for you, Elizabeth Silverthorne, and for all of those who watch Austin Faith Dialogue a most joyous holiday season. We wish you a Merry, Merry Christmas and a blessed and happy New Year. Thank you for watching Austin Faith Dialogue.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.